Well, no, it's all fructose. Fructose is fructose. So it's very similar to glucose. It's got the same number of atoms in it. They're just structured slightly differently. And we know a lot about glucose metabolism because it's been studied for hundreds of years or 100 years. But our understanding of the metabolism of fructose only actually came definitively described by Luc Tappy, who's a Swiss guy, in 2011. So it's brand new, the information around it. We've sort of had some understanding over the last 30 or 40 years, but my textbooks, which are, 40 years old, 35, 40 years old, actually barely scratch the surface of fructose metabolism. And even the current textbooks, which are taught to medical students, barely touch upon it. Fructose is completely and utterly metabolized differently to glucose. And so sugar, the sugar molecule is half glucose, half fructose. Whether or not you get that fructose from high fructose corn syrup, or you get it from honey, or you get it from fruit, it's all exactly the same molecule. Fructose, in summary, is a small amount converted to glycogen, which goes to our restores muscle. The vast majority of it is metabolized in the liver on first pass. So the body doesn't like it getting from the gut into the bloodstream. It goes from the gut straight to the liver, metabolized very, very quickly. And there's some new work coming out suggesting it may be metabolized slightly differently in a few other structures, but effectively most of it goes straight to the liver, metabolized there. Small amount goes down an aldehyde pathway, which gets converted, which is effectively an alcohol pathway. A small amount's going to get turned into as a glass of red wine, but that is an alcohol pathway. Too much, and that's how we make alcohol. You ferment fruit, and it's the fermentation of the fructose gets converted to alcohol. Whether or not you have that in a glass of red wine or you have it in your liver doesn't really matter. It's the same pathway. Another portion goes towards uric acid production. There's an enormous amount of work about uric acid. Uric acid is a byproduct of fructose metabolism. It's the thing commonly heard of with gout, but it's a huge cornerstone in the inflammation pathway. Nitric oxide opens up your blood vessels to control our blood pressure. It controls the blood flow to our brain, and it controls our immunity. Uric acid inhibits nitric oxide function. So if you have too much fructose, you'll produce uric acid. Uric acid will, in fact, affect our blood pressure, affect our brain blood flow, and affects our immune system. So a lot of people nowadays have hypertension, high blood pressure. Literally, by dropping their sugar intake, they reduce their blood pressure within days. Literally, so that's the practical side of it. The practical side, cut out your sugar, your blood pressure will come down literally within days, and you'll need to come off medications or at least think about reducing it. That mechanism is via uric acid. Another pathway that fructose travels down is then into the production of fat, because the excess is converted to fat, which happens in nature. If you eat fruit as an animal and you gorge upon it, you're doing it to get fat for winter, hibernation. Again, that's it. It's a simple mechanism. In nature, fruit drives behavior, and it will go down that pathway of fat production. Some of that fat production actually then goes down in the end pathway to small, dense LDL particles. LDLs are a lipoprotein, how we transport fat and protein in the bloodstream. The current understanding is that the small, dense LDL particles, this is not the topic of cholesterol, the small, dense LDLs, when they become oxidized, and which then are the ones which are a major association and likely cause of inflammation. So if you can actually cut down your fructose, then you cut down your small, dense LDL production, then they're not there to be oxidized, and as a result of that, you reduce your inflammation. Fructose will go and inhibit leptin, and again, I'm using some terms here. Leptin's a hormone produced by the fat in our bodies. So if you've got plenty of leptin, plenty of fat on board, the body produces leptin, and it says don't eat. Fructose breaks that pathway. So it actually that's at a hypothalamic level inside the brain, and actually, so therefore fructose will make you hungry. It will also stimulate a hormone called ghrelin, which is secreted by the stomach, which is the one which actually gives you that rumbling stomach. When you're hungry, You'll get, oh, I've got a rumbly stomach. It's triggered all through the vagus nerve. And as a result of that, you then feel hungry. So fructose, wherever it comes from, will drive certain behaviors. Number one, it will make you hungry. Number two, it'll make you lethargic because of its alcohol. 3, it will make you agitated by the uric acid because your blood pressure will go up. You get a bit excited in that situation. And third, and then finally, it'll actually have this whole effect via the fat metabolism and fat storage. Richard Johnson is a nephrologist who studied this significantly, the role of uric acid in hibernation. And he'll actually look at, as an animal in hibernation, and I'm summarising a lot of Richard's work here in a short bit, so apologies, Richard, if you ever hear this. In hibernation, as you get towards the end of hibernation, you've burnt out your fat stores. The body starts breaking down protein. One of those side effects is uric acid. Uric acid goes up and then actually it starts agitating, and then you wake up out of hibernation. Fructose in fruit, which is the natural source. The natural source of fructose is fruit and honey. Fruit in nature will drive behaviour, and you can see that in the animal kingdom. Here in Australia, we've got possums, which will literally come and strip a fruit tree bare 2 days before you actually want to eat it. And they can't possibly eat that amount of fruit. But they do. They literally gorge themselves on it because they're getting fat. But it's the fructose and the uric acid which is actually driving that pathway to actually continue on. And so animals in the wild will just eat fruit until they can't eat anymore, or they strip the tree bare, but it's a survival mechanism. Now, we as humans go down through the same pathway, so it's a very addictive pathway. It's actually, we've talked about that it stimulates dopamine in the addiction center of the brain, a place called the nucleus accumbens. It's just fascinating to watch. Like sugar's 50% fructose, 50% glucose. Fruit, depending on the different forms, will have varying amounts of fructose and glucose, but it's roughly 50-50. Honey is about 55 to 45% glucose. That's why honey's sweeter than fruit. And high fructose corn syrup is in that same vicinity of 55-45. If you want to eat it, that's fine. However, you should understand that it's going to drive behaviour and it's going to have side effects. And if you want to eat fructose, understand you should be having it seasonally. If you're eating it, you should be having fresh and local, and it should be seasonal. But understand it will make you hungry. So in season, I will have some berries, but I'll have them at night so that the hunger that it actually triggers for me, and when I'm saying some, I'll have 3 or 4. I'm completely addicted. But okay, I like that sweetness, but I'll have it later, in the evening, so that I sleep off the hunger. But if I have that for breakfast, then I'm going to be hungry through the course of the day. And you watch people with a bowl of grapes in front of them, or a bowl of cherries. They can't eat one. You ever seen that? People can't. If I give you a bowl of fruit, it's really hard just to have one. High fructose corn syrup. Who developed that? Do you know that one? The Japanese actually sold that technology to the US. The high fructose corn syrup industry took off, largely related to corn subsidies and farming issues and financial ties. But that technology was actually sent to the US. And in a really cynical sort of way, who's actually won the war now? We've got a whole society in the US and large places around the world that are addicted to sugar and fructose. We've created this scenario now where people are carbohydrate aware. I thought, okay, we've said carbs are troublesome. So the long and short of it is there is no single human biochemical pathway that requires carbohydrate. So we actually require 0 carbohydrate in our diet to survive. We need to have essential fats in our diet. We need to have essential proteins. We need to have essential vitamins and minerals. But there's not a single pathway that we require to eat glucose or fructose, or combinations thereof, which becomes all the galactoses and the maltoses and dextroses. But effectively, we don't actually need it. So if there's actually no pathway that we require to survive, then it becomes a luxury item. And it is a luxury item. So fruit in nature is a luxury item. If you're an animal, you come across it seasonally and you will gorge upon that luxury item so you can get fat for winter. And in society, fruit is a luxury item. Coming back to Japan, I don't know if you've ever been there. They cherish fruit. So an apple, it will be served in an entire box and it will be extremely expensive. But it is seen as a precious special item. It's not a mass-produced, chemically managed, hybridized fruit that we have now. So the fruit of history was small, tiny, wasn't nearly as sweet as it is now. And one of the reasons is we've hybridized fruit. It's been genetically modified, whether or not it's just not maybe genetically modified in the laboratory, even though certain strains are, but it is in fact now lower in fiber and higher in sugar. And it is like that because it actually drives market share and it improves shelf life and it improves profitability. The more sugar you have in the food, the longer it will last. You take the extreme example, which is the wedding cake, which is the fruit mince wedding cake, which is very, very high in sugar. You can keep that piece of wedding cake and still eat it for your 10-year wedding anniversary. And it markets, and then the system, the marketplace now advertises it being rich in potassium and rich in in micronutrients and phytonutrients and everything underneath the sun. However, you get all of those from animal-based product. An animal-based product is going to be rich in the essential vitamins, the essential micronutrients, the essential mineral proteins, and the essential fats. And the animal-based product is very low in carbohydrate. And that's the way we evolved. We are here because we have a carnivore basis and we are omnivores, I think, for survival. It's like our primary requirements are animal-based, but we will graze upon plant-based foods when we can't get our animal-based ones. So, we survive with a plant-based diet and we thrive on an animal-based diet. And that's, people think that's a controversial statement. No, it's frigging biochemistry. And that's all my arguments tend to be. This is biochemistry. I'm not making that stuff up. I mean, the Krebs cycle, which is a basic part of physiology, whether or not you're an animal or a human or an insect, is how we turn our food into energy, adenosine triphosphate, ATP. And we get it, and it can be done via protein, fats, and carbohydrates. And God's whichever, God with a little g or a big G or whatever you believe in, God wasn't stupid enough to make us chemically dependent on a seasonal food source. God's given us the ability to actually utilize whatever is available in nature to give us energy to get from A to B. And that's called the Krebs cycle. The luxury item in that, the seasonally available ones, sugar and carbohydrate. But it comes at a price that it creates inflammation. The other thing about the seasonality and fructose is that fructose, the byproduct is that small dense LDL particle, which gets into the blood vessel wall. That is cleared by macrophages called foam cells to get them out of the wall, and they're under the direct influence of vitamin D. So guess when fruit's actually seasonally available? It's normally the end of summer, beginning of autumn. And so if you want to eat it at that point in time, there's generally an abundant amount of sunlight around. So you're going to have good amounts of vitamin D to actually get rid of the inflammation. We are not meant to be eating fructose in the middle of winter when we don't have sun. So our vitamin D levels drop down. So I think we get more inflamed through winter by eating sugar. And I don't know if that's a contributing cause to that, the winter blues. You've got them in Canada, similar latitude north as we are south. At the end of winter, everyone's got the blues. And is it because their vitamin D levels are down, or is it because their vitamin D levels are down and their inflammation levels are higher?